I remember going to the movies like all the time for comedies. Packed theaters, everyone laughing at the same line.
Oh, absolutely. Quoting them for weeks after.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like a really long time ago now, doesn't it? Because when you look at what's playing today, it's often pretty quiet on the comedy front.
Definitely quieter.
So the big question we're asking is, what actually happened to the big theatrical comedy? Right. And our mission here in this deep dive is basically to figure out who killed the comedy movie, maybe. And maybe more importantly, can it be brought back?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
We're going to use insights from Snarky J to kind of unpack the whole story. Because, laughter is universal, right? So the fact that a whole genre built on making people laugh is declining is, it's pretty curious.
It really is strange when you think about it that way.
Okay, so to really get this, we kind of have to go back first. Before we figure out how far comedy fell, where were we at its peak? What defined that, let's call it the golden era, roughly 1995 to 2010?
Yeah, that time frame feels about right. And what you saw then was these star-driven, really well-produced, mid-budget comedy.
Mid-budget being key there.
Absolutely key. You had actors, huge names, Ben Stiller, Vince Vaughn, Owen Wilson, Will Ferrell, Jim Carrey. They weren't just in movies. They, absolutely dominated the studios, the box office.
Right.
And these films, they weren't, $200 million epics. They were solid mid-budget studio investments. They got wide theatrical releases.
And they were successful.
Huge success. Really big box office returns, consistently.
You mentioned huge returns. Were the numbers really that big back then? I remember Wedding Crashers just being everywhere. Everyone quoted The Hangover.
Oh, the numbers were massive. Seriously. Take Wedding Crashers. That was 2005. It pulled in, $288 million?
Yeah. On
a budget of maybe $40 million?
Wow. Okay.
And Meet the Parents. $330 million on a $55 million budget. Then, The Hangover. That made a whopping $469 million. Spawned a whole franchise. And for a long time, it was the highest grossing R-rated movie ever in theaters.
Right. It beat Beverly Hills Cop, didn't it? After 25 years.
Exactly. For over 25 years. So these weren't just minor hits. They were incredibly profitable moneymakers.
But it wasn't just the money, though, right?
Yeah.
It felt like these films really, got into the culture. Like you said, the quoting. It was part of everyday conversation.
That's it precisely. That cultural ubiquity, there was this uniqueness to them. They created this sort of shared language for audiences.
Such phrases, lines, references.
All sorts of things, that just got kind of adapted into pop culture. And honestly, a lot of those little tidbits still hold up. You still hear them in conversation today.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the key for the studios. They greenlit these mid-budget comedies because they knew they had the legs, They could travel through pop culture for years, become culturally relevant.
And the ROI.
The ROI was fantastic. It wasn't just about the opening weekend. It was about that long tail, that cultural embedding. Made the investment look really...
Okay, so that sets a pretty high bar for what a successful theatrical comedy used to be.
Yeah.
Financially successful, culturally embedded.
Exactly. It connected everything together.
But then, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Around 2008, something started to shift. What impact did the rise of the MCU have on us?
The Marvelification of humor, as the source calls it. That's a really big piece of the puzzle.
Marvelification? What does that actually mean in practice?
It means the MCU introduced this new style of humor, quippy, kind of campy, lots of one-liners, stuff that honestly felt maybe better suited for TV at first.
Okay.
But it eventually just seeped into modern movies, especially in theaters, sprinkled into the big superhero action flicks, sometimes even sci-fi, like Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy.
So how did that specific type of humor compare to, say, the stuff in Step Brothers or Ace Ventura? You mentioned it was safe.
That's the crucial difference, yeah. This MCU humor, it's often described as safe and incredibly meta. It's focus group to hell, basically.
To avoid offending anyone.
Exact. Maximize the audience, maximize the box office returns, don't rock the boat. And that's a world away from the sheer absurdity in Step Brothers or some of the, let's say, non-PC themes in Ace Ventura or even Tropic Thunder.
Oh, yeah, Tropic Thunder.
You would be really hard-pressed to find a single line or joke in that movie that you could make and not, immediately.
Right. So does that mean audiences just started expecting laughs from different places? They didn't need a pure comedy anymore?
That seems to be a big part of it. Audiences started getting their chuckles from those big event films that they felt they had to see in theaters anyway.
Which reduces demand for a specific comedy night out.
Greatly, yeah. And those big franchises, MCU, Star Wars, Jurassic World, Fast and Furious, they just have all managed to squeeze those mid-budget films, comedies included, completely out of...
And out of the studio's minds, presumably.
Definitely out of their prime. There was even a study looking from 91 to 2010. So before the MCU really hit its stride.
Okay.
And it showed the top 50 earning films were already being dominated by sci-fi, pretty much at the expense of comedy and drama. Action films, click, sing.
So the trend was already there, but Marvel just supercharged it. And studios, being risk-averse, they'd rather bet $150 million on a blockbuster than $40 million on a maybe-hit comedy.
Precisely. And you add in things like legacy sequels, Ghostbusters, Afterlife, Top Gun Maverick. They also work to steal attention away from new or, standalone voice.
So if the main play's audiences get laughs shifts from dedicated comedies to just, like, little moments in blockbusters, how does that change the whole game for studio? It sounds like more than just a tone shift. It's like fundamentally economic.
It's absolutely economic. It completely reshapes the incentive. Why take a risk on a pure comedy, even a mid-budget one, when your guaranteed billion-dollar franchise entry can deliver some laughs along with the spectacle?
Makes sense from their perspective, I guess. Less risk.
It's perceived as the safer bet, yeah. Cannibalizes the need for the standalone comedy.
Okay, so beyond the type of humor and the franchise takeover, what about the business side? Like, how movies actually make money these days, especially with streaming? How did that play into it?
Oh, streaming. Yeah. Well, the collapse of the theatrical to streaming window, that might be the absolute worst thing that could have happened to the comedy genre specifically.
Worse than Marvel. Why specifically comedy?
Well, think about it. That window, the time a movie was only in theaters, it just collapsed right after post-pandemic.
Right, it got super short.
Dramatically short. Like 45 days of theatrical exclusivity became common. Disney, Paramount, Warner Brothers, they were kind of leading the charge on that.
Okay.
Then it hits PVOD, that's premium video on demand, where you pay extra to watch it at home, sometimes while it's still in theaters, and maybe 37, 39 days.
Go fast.
And then SVOD, subscription video on demand, your Netflix, your Hulu by 2024. That fell to just under 100 days on average. That's the quickest we have ever seen major theater releases hit streaming.
And theaters hate this, right? They're literally lobbying to make the window bigger again, trying to get that FOMO back.
Exactly. They want that fear of missing out. If you know it'll be on streaming in 6 weeks, why rush out? And the first casualties of that thinking are the nice-to-have films.
Which are your dramas and your comedies.
Precisely. A big VFX blockbuster. Okay, maybe you do want to see that on a giant IMAX.
Nobody needs an IMAX screen to watch Wedding Crashers or Trop.
Exactly right. The value proposition for seeing a comedy in the theater versus waiting a bit, or...
So studios just learn to kind of
Pretty much. Offload any comedy that does see the light of day. Hulu, Netflix, Prime Video, bypass the theatrical gamma that.
And does that also kill the whole shared experience thing, laughing together in a theater?
It definitely hurt. Comedies lose some of that cultural relevance because they lose that shared, people sitting together laughing at the same moments and walking out and referencing it.
Yeah.
That shared laughter was a big part of what amplified the success of those films back era.
Yeah.
Makes them feel bigger.
And what about after the theatrical run? Didn't DVDs used to be a big deal for making money back?
Oh, huge. The DVD afterlife, as the source calls it, that was a really big part of how the films earned money after.
Right. The pipeline was like theaters, then DVD, then maybe premium cable.
Yeah, that was the old model. Streaming basically just collapsed that entire tail completely.
No more blockbuster nights.
No physical media sales to speak of, no rental places. There's just no way for anyone to step out and help the studios they're on.
So that less reliable back end, that just gives studios even fewer reasons to greenlight those $30 to $60 million comedies in the first place.
Exactly. It's way less incentive. So when you really look at it, it wasn't just one thing. It was, like you said, a perfect storm. Multiple pressures converging, dismantling the entire ecosystem that supported these mid-budget theatrical comedies, from release to revenue, the whole thing.
Okay, wow. So the economics, the structure, the franchises, it all piled up. But there's another angle too, isn't there? Beyond the business side, there's been a big societal shift that's impacted comedy.
Absolutely. Yeah, moving away from the pure economic, society has arguably reached new levels of cultural sense and maybe a willingness to be, triggered or outraged by literally almost.
Okay. And how does that play out for comedy?
Well, it creates a situation where tons of classic comedy hits, you mentioned the Hangover films, Tropic Thunder, Ace Ventura, they would likely really struggle to get made today.
The source used the Tropic Thunder example, right? Robert Downey Jr.'s character.
Yeah, the blackface portrayal. In today's climate, that would almost certainly trigger immediate, widespread, huge controversy.
So how does that kind of sensitivity, or maybe fear of controversy, affect what studios are actually willing to put out there now?
Yeah.
Does it make the humor safer?
It absolutely seems to. Studios, hoping to avoid any potential blowback, they start self-censoring.
Right.
And that often leads to humor that feels, way more bland, doesn't take as many risks.
Which is tough because isn't risk-taking kind of fundamental to comedy? Finding that edge?
It really is. Sometimes the biggest laughs come out of that shock, that holy shit, I can't believe they actually said that moment. And the source is careful here, explicitly stating, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Some audiences will defend this shift as progress, absolutely.
But others see
as death of edgy comedy, yeah. It's a real tension.
And that filters down to the audience too, right? I remember reading Zach Galifianakis, when asked about doing another Hangover movie, basically said something brilliant like, I don't think people care.
Exactly. That says a lot, doesn't it? Just highlights this core question. How does a genre that often needs to push boundaries adapt when those boundaries are constantly shifting and the consequences for crossing them are so high?
Yeah. It's that tension again between creative freedom and avoiding controversy definitely impacts what gets greenlit.
Hugely, especially the risk.
Okay, so if traditional theatrical comedy is, as the source says, kind of on life support, where is comedy living now? And what are the sort of downstream effects of this shift for actors, writers, audience?
Well, like we said, comedy technically isn't dead.
Yeah.
Moved platforms, mostly.
Right. It's still around.
Oh, yeah. You still see comedic elements in big event films. Barbie, for example, made over $1 billion last year. And it's definitely comedic in a lot of ways.
But it wasn't a $1 billion hit because it was a pure comedy.
Exactly. It was $1 billion because it was a huge cultural event film that everyone was talking about. The comedy was part of the package, not the sole driver. Same with Free Guy back in 2021. Made over $330 million, had comedic elements.
But also sold hard on the action and sci-fi.
Right. Tied in very strongly with those genres. So pure comedy in theaters is rare, but humor finds other home.
Like where?
Well, stand-up specials, sketch comedy, they thrive on places like YouTube, Netflix. There's tons of comedy to be found on streaming services generally.
Okay, so the form changed. But what about the talent?
That's where you see some real content. We're seeing a lot of established comedic actors either turning to drama or doing more TV. People like Steve Carell, Jonah Hill, and comedy writers. A lot of them have moved to streaming shows or late nights. And even late night comedy shows are taking a huge hit lately, viewership.
So the whole ecosystem is shifting. And what about younger audiences? What does this mean for them?
That's maybe the biggest long-term impact. Younger audiences just aren't experiencing they didn't experience and likely never will a big comedic theatrical boom like we saw.
Where do they get their humor from then?
Increasingly, it seems, from short forms. Instagram Reels, TikTok, YouTube Short, quick hits, bite size.
Which really shows how adaptable humor is, right? The art form itself just finds new ways, new platforms. Shorter forms, maybe, but it's still there.
Absolutely. Comedy finds a way. But that shared communal experience of laughing together in a dark theater, that specific thing feels very different now, maybe rare.
So after laying all that out, the big question we started with, is there hope? Can theatrical comedy actually make a comeback? Or is it, really gone from the big screen for good?
Well, the source we're drawing from, Snarky J, is actually cautiously optimistic, believes comedy can come back.
Really? Okay.
Though maybe not exactly the way it was during that peak era, 95 to 2010. It's not dead, the source says, but definitely on life support.
Okay, on life support. So what would it take to, revive the patient? What are the proposed solutions? How do we get it off life support?
A few key things are suggested. First, and maybe contentiously, stretch that theatrical-to-streaming window back out.
Make people wait again. Create the FOMO.
People need to feel forced to wait months. Yeah. Right. Create that urgency to see it in theaters if they don't want to miss out or wait forever.
Okay, so what else?
Second, comedies themselves need to feel like an event again.
How do you do that without a huge budget?
Well, bring in some real star power again, dedicated comedy stars, maybe coaxing back some of those names like Vince Vaughn, Owen Wilson, Ben Stiller for actual comedies.
Give them a clear identity.
Clear identity, yeah. And maybe bring in a healthy dose of edgier voices again. Not necessarily offensive or non-PC for the sake of it, but just a little more willing to take some risks.
High concept hooks too, not just Marvel comedy without the Marvel.
Exactly. Needs a strong hook, something unique, not just bland safe jokes transplanted into a non-superheroes.
And what about the studios? What do they need to do?
Well, they have to actually see these as promising things again, not just write them off.
But real marketing behind them.
Put effort into marketing that makes the film feel like an event, yes. And crucially, they also have to be willing to take those mid-budget risks again.
Which seems tough when budgets elsewhere are just ballooning. You mentioned the Acolyte cost.
Yeah, the source points out reports of something like $650,000 per minute for a show like The Acolyte. If studios can spend that,
then surely they can risk $40 or $50 million on a comedy that might actually hit big in theaters.
That's the argument, yeah. It requires a shift in their risk assessment and their willingness to invest in something other than a guaranteed franchise tend.
So boiling it down, what are the main culprits that put theatrical comedy in the hospital, according to the source?
Seems to be those three big things we talked about. Corporate caution, the dominance of franchises, and the absolute collapse of that theatrical.
And the ultimate fix.
Ultimately, studios need to give us a reason to laugh together again in a theater.
Yeah. But the big question hanging over all of this, really, given everything we've discussed, audience habits, studio priorities, is will the industry actually be willing to make those kinds of strategic changes to revive theatrical comedy?
Or will it just remain primarily a streaming thing, a short-form thing? It really speaks to how entertainment consumption is constantly evolving.
Okay, so let's try and unpack this as we wrap up. What we've really explored today is how this thing we maybe took for granted, the big theatrical comedy film, that source of shared laughs and cultural inside jokes, how it's been hit from all sides.
New humor trends, blockbusters taking over, streaming windows shrinking, changing cultural sensitivities.
Yeah, all these forces just fundamentally reshape the whole entertainment landscape, especially for comedy.
Definitely.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. What does it actually mean for us, as a society, when that experience of collective laughter sitting together in a dark theater becomes really rare?
Does it change how we connect?
Or how we process humor? Or even what we define as funny? Especially maybe for a generation that's growing up without that kind of big shared comedic event being a regular thing. Something to think about.